Just here in the Flow Hive apiary this morning doing a little maintenance. We've got a split here that was split from this hive, and we've also got another split here which my sister had a spare queen and started a very small split in this little nuke box. So we're going to have a look at them. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering them. We will be taking the roofs off the hives and really having a look at what's going on inside, making sure there's a laying queen in both hives. So as always, especially if you're new to beekeeping, have a good bee suit, your gloves, get your veil on, which I actually don't have with me right now. So could I grab your veil? Unusually I haven't got the hood connected to this jacket, so I'll just wear one of these. Okay. So I'm just going to take the roof off. Now in this particular hive, well, you can see a beetle running here. There's a small hive beetle, good to look out for. You don't want too many of them in the hive. Little black shiny beetles called the small hive beetle. Came to Australia about 20 years ago from Africa, and a bit of a menace in the hive. Sorry about that, little beetles. I know you didn't mean to be a menace. Alright, so the next thing to do is to take off the inner cover. Now I gave these a little bit of smoke just before we started, just in the entrance. They're a small colony, so you don't need to have too much smoke. You can give a little bit in the top there. Smoking your hands is not a bad idea. It masks the your own smell. Although wear gloves if you're new to beekeeping. And you can put this right at the entrance, just so that waft of smoke just is in the flight path of the hive. Give it a puff every now and then to keep it going. Getting your J tool, this is the one that comes with our suits and jackets kits, under the inner cover and just lifting it off. Now because this inner cover is right on top of the brood nest, we need to do a check to make sure the queen isn't on here. Now I'm seeing a few more hive beetles, which means we might activate the hive beetle trap in the bottom of the flow hive too here, to make sure they don't get too out of control. So I'm having a quick look for a queen. Now if you're not tuned in to looking for queens yet, don't worry, just put this at the entrance, so if she is there she can crawl back in. She can't fly when she's in egg laying mode because she's too heavy. It's actually amazing, if it's time for the hive to swarm, then they'll starve her to make sure she is light enough to fly. Just adding a wee little bit of smoke across the top here. And so straight away I'm looking at this hive and going, okay, the numbers aren't quite ready to super yet. It's one of the things I was interested in today was, is this hive ready to super? Straight away I'm going, no, the numbers aren't there yet, although they're doing a good job of drawing some comb. I think the reason why they're taking a little bit of time is we've had a really dry spell with not much nectar, and then we've had really intense rain and even flooding here. This valley was filled with water, which is incredible because we've had such a big fire time, and it's so nice to have some rain. We're lucky to have some rain. We've had some rain all down the east coast, which is fantastic, and that will kick off the flowers, but they're not really going yet. There's not a whole lot of nectar for the bees to collect, so I'm not expecting them to have big heavy frames. Now I just used the J end of the tool just to hook under the frame and pull that out. They're doing a beautiful job of drawing their natural comb. It's nice and straight here. If I hold it over here in the shade, you'll be able to see it. So you want to be careful in this case that queen doesn't drop onto the ground. So it's best to hold your frames above the hive when you're inspecting if you can. So I'm seeing larvae in the cells, I'm seeing brood. So we have a laying queen, and there's even eggs down the cells, which looks like a tiny grain of rice. So straight away I'm going, this hive has a laying queen, and so far it's looking good. You can see here, these are the brood cells. Now you might even be able to see down them the glistening white of the larvae, or grubs they also get called, just around where my finger is. So that's them in their grub phase. They'll spin a silk cocoon around themselves and go through that metamorphosis. They spend about 11 days in that larvae stage and another 11 days in the capped or cocooned phase before they emerge as a brand new fluffy baby bee, ready to take on the chores of the hive. Got any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering those.
We have a question from Peter who says, is it normal for a split to be done at this time of year in Sydney? Both of my hives are presenting with swarm cells and drones. One hive has 7 swarm cells, 2 with larvae. Should I split?
Okay. It generally, you've split in the spring and the early summer, but I say in Sydney you'd have enough left of the season, and the winters are actually quite short, and you would have a good chance of splitting now and your hive doing well, especially with the recent rains setting off the flowers. It's all about whether there's flowers coming up, really, and also the temperature. If it's really cold, it would be hard for the bees, but it's very warm at the moment, so you could still take a split in your area. So that's looking good. So I didn't notice the queen on there, but even so, I haven't got my frame holders on this hive today. So I'm just going to rest that up against the hive, so if the queen is there, she can crawl back into the hive. Keep the questions coming. Now let's have a look at this frame here. This is a nice example of the naturally drawn comb just starting out. So that they do a bit over here and a bit on the other side, and then they start joining it together. You'll notice the cell size will vary a lot depending on what the bees are planning to do. So over on this side, we've got quite large cells, which are more drone size. So they make them for the boys, but larger cells for the larger bee. And then over here, we have worker size. It's about 5.3 millimeters. And around here, we're just above 6 millimeters. So it's really interesting to watch them just do their naturally drawn comb and size it for what they want to do.
Danny's asking, have you heard anything about Russian bees on the market?
Not particularly. If anyone's got some information on Russian bees, put them in the comments below. Okay. Here is a drone bee. You can see it's got a bigger body and bigger eyes. It's just in my finger. There's about 600 of them in a hive or so, and up to say 50,000 workers. So mainly the women in the hive are holding the fort and doing all of the chores. You can see a little bit of nectar glistening in these cells as well. If I just brush the bees out of the way here, you can see the glint of nectar, which is good, so they're finding some nectar as well. See that glinting nectar in the bottom of the cell, so they're reducing that water content and turning it into honey, doing their amazing thing with their enzymes and producing the beautiful thing we call honey, full of vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients and all sorts of healing properties as well.
Pam would like to know, what does splitting mean?
So a split is where it's one of the ways to get started in beekeeping, and you basically take some of the frames out of one of the a brood box on another hive and put them into a new hive. Now you can either add a queen from a queen breeder, or if they've got eggs on those frames, they could raise a queen from those resources themselves. So if you particularly want a nice friendly genetic, then buy a queen in. You put the queen in with the brood frames from the bottom box of this hive, you look after it, and your hive will grow. Now there's a few nuances to that, and we've got videos showing you exactly how to do that, and in-depth videos on thebeekeeper.org if you're really interested to dive into the world of beekeeping. We've got some very good high quality training videos there if you're interested. Also a lot of free stuff on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. We've spent about 5 years now making content and teaching people how to look after bees, which is fantastic, and we inspired so many new beekeepers with our invention that we really wanted to make sure that everybody's able to get their questions answered and is supported so that they can look after their bees, because if we look after them, then they'll look after us.
Jai's asking, how do you know when you need to split?
So there's a few reasons why you might do a split, and one of them is if your hive's quite packed with bees. If you look in the windows and there's a lot of bees, you might do a split to prevent them from swarming, but also it gives you another hive. So if you there's a few things to do if you've got a hive packed with bees. One of them is to take a split, and that will mean they're much less likely to swarm. So your hive will be less likely to swarm. Just come a little bit further forward, then the camera will work better. So another reason is you might just be wanting to multiply your hive, so you might be deciding to take splits quite early before the colonies even big. So queen breeders and bee breeders will do that. They'll just take splits even from nuke boxes like this one. It's a tiny little nuke box, and they'll just split it into two and keep going like that if they're planning to get lots of nucleus hives ready to sell. Fantastic.
Linda says she has loner bees out of the hive flying over spring snow and low 50s temperatures. Can she feed them sugar water?
Oh wow. Okay. It's great hearing all of the different climates and all of the beekeeping around the world that's going on. We've got snow there, which is amazing. I believe beekeepers do in that climate start feeding their bees sugar water if they want to get their bees to have a jump on the season. Now the best information for you to decide whether it's a good idea where you are is from your local beekeepers. So reach out either online or to a local bee club and just find out whether that's a great thing to do. You'll get somebody who's got a lot of knowledge and you'll learn a lot, and it's a great thing to be able to pass down the knowledge about beekeeping to the next generation of beekeepers. So I'm just looking at this frame. There's a lot of fascinating things going on here. We've got very yellow wax here. Sometimes the bees bringing extraordinary yellow wax, and it's so beautiful. And over here we've got the worker brood, which you can see have capping that's opaque. It's harder to see through. We've got no capped honey, which shows they're on a bit of a shortage of nectar. Normally you might see some capped honey around here. We are seeing some nectar though, so that's great. And down here, sticking out like little bullet shapes, is the drone brood. So the drones are a bit bigger, so their brood sticks out a bit. And there's a drone there, you can see a bit of a bigger body, bigger eyes just in front of my finger there. Their eyes are big and touch in the middle, and that can be a good way as you're learning to tell the drones from the workers or the queen. The queen has the same eyes as a worker, just a longer abdomen. We'll keep a lookout for her as we go. We don't need to find her, we can tell this colony's happy and healthy. Keeping a lookout for pests and diseases as we go as well.
Sarah's asking, would you suggest splitting this time of year or adding a second brood box? She's in the Wollongong area and currently has active hive beetles.
Okay, Wollongong area. It is still quite hot. It really depends on your colony. If you look in the window and you can hardly see the comb, then it may be a good idea to take a split just to relieve that pressure. Although this late in the season they're probably less likely to swarm, and you could also choose to just ride through to the next springtime and split in the springtime.
Luke's wondering what the best way to tell if your bees are going to swarm.
So one of the best things is just the overcrowding trigger. So if you open the side windows and you can hardly see the comb, then, and especially in the springtime, there's a good chance they'll start preparing to swarm. Now the next trigger, or the next observation, is a whole lot of bees at the entrance, but not necessarily just at the entrance and going up the hive, but hanging down like a bee beard off the landing board. Sometimes they'll do that on a hot day, but if that stays there for days, then that could be an indication that they're gearing up to swarm also. Okay, I'm going to keep going through a few more frames, keep the questions coming in. It's a beautiful day here. Doing your brood inspections on mid-morning to mid-afternoon on a warm sunny day is the best time to do it. The bees are more calm. Having said that, notice the note of this hive change a little bit. So as you get more experience in beekeeping, you start tuning into the sound of your bees and what that means. So I've noticed the note just changed. I haven't added any smoke since the beginning, so what we could do is just waft a little bit over them and let them settle again. And that has a calming effect on the bees. Takes a little while, but those bees will then calm down a little bit.
Danny's asking, if you're doing a split and you can't find the queen, should you not perform the split and then come back later and look for her?
Okay, if you're doing a walk-away split, in Michael Bush's words, then you don't need to find the queen. You just take half of the frames in the brood box and stick them in another hive, and if you've got eggs in both boxes, then the one without the queen will raise a new one. So you don't even have to find no queen with that method. If you're introducing a queen, yes, you'll need to know which box she is in. Otherwise you'll get into the situation where you put your new queen in and it'll fight with the old queen and you'll most likely lose the new one you've put in.
Anita's asking, if you feed bees sugar water and they don't use it for energy, will they store it as nectar?
Okay, here's the queen here. She's just running around the corner getting a bit camera shy. There, just where my finger is, and you can see how she's got a shiny back plate where she's been in the hive long enough, because she can last for years, to wear the fur off her thorax there. So that's cool. She's also got bigger legs and she walks with bigger strides, so often that's the way you pick her up, is just by her movement. But also her abdomen is longer and extends about the length of her wings again, almost. As the other bees have the wings coming close to their stinger at the back. There she is. Looks nice and healthy. You can see a nice big queen capable of laying a couple of thousand eggs a day when the time's right. Beautiful. Let us know if you can see the queen there in the picture, whether the imagery is good enough. Give us a thumbs up. Yeah, she's just diving around the corner again. Okay, camera shy again. Now she's back here. Sometimes they can be a bit camera shy. There she goes. So if you're taking a split, you would then make sure you knew which box she was in. You could add the new queen to the one without a queen. It's amazing, isn't it, that there's this whole hive going on. There's one bee that's doing all the egg laying. You'd think they would have multiples to be more robust, but there you go.
We're getting lots of thumbs up. People can see the queen.
Okay, good. Keep the questions coming.
Okay, back to Anita's question. If you feed bees sugar water and they don't use it for energy, will they store it as nectar?
They will. So there's a couple of different solutions that you can mix up. If you make a thicker one, and there's plenty of information on the net about that. If you make a thicker solution, they're more likely to store it. And beekeepers will do that if they want a bit of storage prior to winter. If they want a bit of storage prior to winter, they'll feed them what's called a thick syrup, and that way they're more likely to store it. It's interesting, Queen's checking out a queen cup here. It's a little queen cup, which will be interesting to see whether there's an egg being laid, so that the queen will actually lay an egg in that, and the new queen might even supersede her. So it's quite an interesting architecture of how everything goes on in a beehive.
Wasim's wondering why you aren't getting stings on your hand.
Okay, this is a calm hive. It's all about the genetics and also how you operate in the hive, and also the day you choose. So if I notice the bees starting to do their warning buzzes, I'd put my gloves on, or if I started getting stings, I'd put my gloves on. I'm comfortable to get a few stings. Some people aren't, and if you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves, and that'll minimise the stings.
Jill's wanting to know what type of bees are they? Are they Italian?
So it's often a bit of a mixture in a hive, but yes, you're quite right. This does look more like the Italian bees. We're getting a waggle dance here, which is cool, and another one here. The waggle dance is their communication of often, or all sorts of things. It's how they communicate. This one here looks like a grooming waggle, where it's just waggling and stopping, but not in any particular pattern. So it's saying, come and groom me, come and groom me. Other times they'll be moving in a figure of 8 or a round pattern, communicating somehow in the dark, in a hive, to all the other bees where the nectar is and how far away it is. And often what I've witnessed is really intricate directions, and it's hard for us to fathom with an insect this size that presumably has a tiny, tiny brain, how they manage to communicate such intricate information of where the nectar and pollen sources are.
Michael would like to know, how likely is it for a split not to requeen itself?
I find as a beekeeper, you get in runs, and you'll find that you'll have good luck, and one season almost all of your splits go well. But just recently, our splits didn't do so well, and I think it's partly to do with the real dry we had and not as much available nectar, and the bees were a bit more stressed and and a number of our splits didn't actually raise their own queen. So then you're in the stage of giving them another go by putting in another frame with eggs, or adding a queen if you can get hold of one from a bee breeder, or merging it back with an original with the original colony using the newspaper technique. Basically, just to explain that quickly, if you just get a box of bees and put it on top of another box of bees, they can fight. You can lose a bunch of bees like that. If you put a piece of newspaper in between, they'll slowly chew it away and get used to each other's smell before they merge together.
Danny's asking, do you put the split close to the original brood box?
That's a great question. So when taking a split, and we've got videos showing you exactly how to do that. If you're thinking of taking a split, make sure you watch a couple of those that we've done. What you're trying to do, and I'm going to put that back now, so I'll reunite the queen with its colony here. So what you're trying to do is juggle the colonies so the returning forages are shared between the two hives. So there's a few different ways to do that, but the simplest way I find is give the new one, which is this one, the lion's share of the flight path home. So I put that almost in the place, the smaller, weaker colony almost in the place where the foragers are coming home, and the bigger one, move it over. So you start by moving the original hive over a bit, putting your new box here, and take some frames out of that one, put them into this one, and put some fresh frames back in here to alleviate the pressure of that of so many bees in that hive. And it's a great thing to do, because if you don't want a colony, then someone else surely will.
Lindsay's asking, how do they know as a group whether to build brood cells or drone cells or nectar cells?
That's a very, very interesting question. And what I find even more fascinating is, how do they know what to complete? Because one cell might have 50 different bees have worked on it. So how do they keep the architecture in their beautiful and intricate way all in line? And then they do things like morph 6mm cells with 5mm cells, and it'd be a hard thing to do for any human, get all of those lines set up, but the bees can do it somehow. And I don't know the answer, but there seems to be some kind of collective consciousness. They're operating as a superorganism. All of the bees act almost as one.
Tracy would like to know, is fortnightly too often to inspect your brood box?
Look, the answer is it really depends. I think if you're being gentle and choosing nice times to inspect, then by all means get in there fortnightly and really have a look at what's going on. If you're in places like Germany, they actually in certain times of the year encourage you to inspect them weekly. Here in Australia, it's not necessary to inspect that often, but it's a great learning if you really want to get into beekeeping, because every time you open the hive you see something new, and that's a never-ending learning journey.
Brendan's asking, when you split, do you need to move the new box well away from the original hive, or should you move that second box? Sorry, that doesn't quite read well.
It's okay, I get the question. If you don't need to move it away, bees will thrive right up against each other, and if you have a look at the way the commercial beekeepers do it, then they'll often be even in blocks of 4 or so, just right together. So you don't need to move it away, however you can. So another way to take a split is to take a split, plenty of bees on it, block the entrance in the evening and take it straight away to a new location. Now you'd want that location to be more than about 6 kilometres away, in order for them not to recognise the area and come home to the other hive. So there's a little bit on moving bees there. There is tricks, however, if you need to move them a shorter distance by putting branches and rags and things in front of the entrance to disorientate them a little bit and get them to reorientate to that new location. So if you are planning to move your hive, then have a look at some of the content we've got on moving your hive as well. If you really want a in-depth, step-by-step handhold, then have a look at the beekeeper.org. It's a new initiative we've started with beekeepers from all over the world, sharing their knowledge about beekeeping, and in doing so, we hope that we can teach not only what we do here, but also in other parts of the world. And it's a great thing to really, I guess what we're trying to do with it, apart from making it a 50% of profits for habitat regeneration and protection, we're trying to make it so that it inspires more than just how to look after your bees, but the amazing, fascinating world of bees. And I've certainly have learned a lot already from the experts that we've brought in to create content for the beekeeper.org. Have a look at that if you're interested in really getting more in-depth knowledge, and it can be a fast way to really increase your beekeeping knowledge. We've got time for a couple more questions.
Trish is asking, any tips for cross comb? I've spent time straightening comb, but they still keep building bridges.
Okay, so building bridges between them, like you can see here, is pretty normal. Different bees will do more or less of that kind of thing, and it doesn't matter so much than building bridges between the top bars like that. But if you find, because you can just cut that away and still get the frames out, but if you find where they're joining your naturally drawn comb from one frame to the other, then that's quite tricky, and you'll need to manage that if you're doing naturally drawn comb. Those that don't know, naturally drawn comb is where you just let the bees draw the comb themselves like this from the wooden comb guide that we insert in the top here of the frame, as opposed to putting a foundation sheet or a plastic sheet of foundation in here. Now, there's lots of advantages, but one of the disadvantages is they can go wonky, as you say, and sometimes one hive is just really intent on going wonky. But if you keep straightening them out, in the end they'll stay straight, because the next frame you put in, you could put in between two straight ones, and away you go. If you're really having trouble, you could try putting some wax and wire foundation in just to straighten them out, or even if you've got another hive, you could add some already straight frames to give them a guide. Another tip is keep your hive level in the sideways direction, because if it's not level, you might find that gravity's wandering this piece of comb onto the other frame. But generally, all you need to do is just to push it back into line. If they started wandering off here, then you just get your hive tool and just nudge it over to keep them back on this comb guide. And if it's really wonky and they've already built the whole thing out, move it to the edge of the hive. Sometimes you'll have to pick up two frames together, move it to the edge of the hive, wait till there's no brood in there, and then just harvest that as honeycomb and give them another go at starting straight next time. Good luck with that. If you're still having trouble, have a look on, we've got some videos showing you how to put the bees back in line. In fact, I could do a little bit here just to show you that the wax, you can see, is going along nice and straight here. It's just starting to wander off to that side. Maybe if I get in the shade, you'll be able to see that. So you have to be careful with naturally drawn comb because it's quite weak. I'll just see if I can show you how to do this. So you can see how they were going along neatly, and they've just started to wander off this comb guide here. So all I do is get my tool from the other side, nestle it in so I'm not squashing any bees, and just push that a little bit back online. The bees will then do their work of joining that up to the guide again. So that's not a very extreme example. You often get it going a lot more wonky than that. You push it back on and the bees will reconnect it. Another thing you can do if you're really having trouble and you've got big sections of brood that are all wonky, you need to fix it up, is you can actually cut it right out and either use toothpicks through the side holes here or rubber bands going around to hold it in the frame, let them reconnect it to the edges again. That can be a way to fix it up if they've really gone wonky. So many great questions. If you've got more questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get to answering them. And thank you very much for tuning in with us here today as we do a bit of maintenance in the apiary. If you'd like us to cover something specific, then put it in the comments below and we'll see if we can show you how to do that next week.